Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to be talking about Andrew Yang, language, and the use of language in politics, and specifically how we get the awesome information of Andrew Yang to potential voters and convert them from either non-voters or opponent voters to Andrew Yang voters, right? Okay? All right. So the reason why, so basically, I want to talk today really about shifting into go mode for converting opponent voters and non-voters to Andrew Yang voters. First in the primary, then in the general election, okay? So right now what I'm talking about, this will be primarily for the primaries. All right, so the reason I'm talking about this today is I listened to an absolutely fantastic Slate podcast about democratic schools. Schools in the United States of America, almost always in wealthy areas, where the parents allow the children to vote on some, most, or all of the things that happen in the school, right? Now, first, you should understand, one, the podcast is absolutely fantastic. You can find it just by Googling Slate Podcasts, Democratic Schools. It's really worth listening to. It's about 50 minutes long. And it really gets into this idea of language in politics. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But one thing to understand, though, that I walked away with that I'm really fascinated by, excuse me, is the majority of democratic schools historically fail. So so essentially, there are a lot of theories on why democratic schools generally fail. But one of the top theories is that fundamentally children lack wisdom. Right? Wisdom comes with experience. Children don't have experience. Children lack wisdom. And at the end of the day, the parents don't want to put the decisions of a school into the hands of people with no wisdom. All right? So it was it's absolutely fascinating podcast. All right. But there was this one really particular point that they made in the podcast that reminded me of the importance of language in politics. So basically, this pre-K school with about 22 kids in the school in the class, they had to choose a class name. Okay, and this class name would be important. It would determine the theme for their entire year, right? So the kids were able to nominate different names, and one of the children nominated Dolphin, and one of the children nominated T-Rex, right? There were some other names in there. None of them got enough of a mass following to make it to the top. T-Rex and Dolphins made it to the top. The class voted that Dolphins would be the name for the class, okay? So the day after that, everybody comes into the class. All the kids come into the class, and the dolphin class, and everybody goes, ee, and they all make sounds to each other like dolphins, right? Getting into the theme of the new class. Except this one kid. This one kid is going, rawr, and just like a T-Rex, right? And he's walking around the room saying, rawr, like a T-Rex, while every other kid is saying dolphin, right? Well, the next day, one of the other kids joined the T-Rex kid, right? And now there's two kids roaring at each other in the beginning of the morning, right? And then on the third and the fourth day, that T-Rex group grew. It never went over half the class, right? But it had a significant number of kids in like a third of the kids in the class were roaring at each other like T-Rexes, right? I thought this is absolutely fascinating. I was like, that's politics, man. That is so politics, right? It's language. Politics is about language. It's whether you're squeaking like a dolphin or whether you're roaring like a T-Rex, right? And one of the things, and now for us as adults, this goes way beyond this. So one of the things I realized is I had a really wonderful weekend this weekend. We went away to a city like 300-400 miles away from my home, and we visited a friend that we knew about 10-15 years ago, and this friend has really been incredibly successful, right? And it was just, we were invited to this friend's 40th birthday. And so my whole family went. We spent the day talking with him and all of his friends, right? And so about 2 or 3 times throughout the day, not most of the day, but just a few times, we talked about politics. And I threw in the name Andrew Yang, and I was like, anybody familiar with him? And no one at the party was familiar with Andrew Yang. Didn't know who he was or what he was about, right? But well over half of the people at the party hadn't even started looking at Democrat primary candidates, let alone researching them, right? So I realized I wanted to talk about Andrew Yang, but I knew they didn't have the language to talk about Andrew Yang. And what's the language you need to understand and want to vote for Andrew Yang? Well, you have to know what UBI is. You have to know what universal basic income is. A lot of people use VAT, value-added tax, right? I never touch that. I don't think it's really important to talk about. But VAT's in the mix, right? Also, he talks about policies. What are Andrew Yang's policies? What is a policy? What's the difference? So he has various policies, right? One of the things is he's against putting in people away for low-level drug crimes, right? And he's going to free a lot of low-level drug offenders, right? He's going to just literally let them out of the prisons, right? So like that's a policy that he's going to enact, right? So basically you have to know about automation, you have to know about UBI, you have to know about VAT, you have to know, excuse me, all these different terms, and that's just the start. Oh, the other thing is he's Asian, right? He'll be the first Asian president. Many people don't know that. Many people don't know that he would be the first Asian president, and many people don't know that it's even important for us to be thinking about minority occupation of the presidency, right? Because that has only started in America. Obama was the first minority president in the history of America, right? And so all these things, it's language. And we have to establish that language, right, within the people. We have to make sure that they know this language, know what these terms mean. And then we have to educate, and then we have to persuade. So first we have to explain the language around Andrew Yang, and then we have to persuade them to vote for Andrew Yang, right? So what do we have to, I just want to break down what we have to educate, right? At the basic level, right? We have to educate people on governing. They have to know the difference between policy and principle, right? So like, for instance, Andrew Yang's principle is that automation should not take a single additional job. It's taken enough jobs from Americans already. That's his principle, right? And he'll use that principle to govern, right? What is the policy he wants to put into place? $1,000 a month for every American between 18 and 65 years old. That will be his policy. And guess what? The policy doesn't say anything about automation, right? And so we have to teach that, the difference between policy and principle, specifically for Andrew Yang and where he's going to stand, for those different things. Achievement, right? We have to explain how achievement is happening in politics today, right? So we don't need to explain the obvious things. Many people will understand that achievement for a presidency is a good economy and everybody has jobs. You don't really need to say that, right? But there are some changes in achievement that we should be given the language for, right? One of the things that we need to explain is what Donald Trump has done for achievement within the presidency. A lot of people say that Donald Trump's done nothing. That is the most outrageous, ridiculous statement that anyone could possibly believe. The reality is Donald Trump has accomplished a lot through deconstruction, right? Through deconstructing governmental organizations like the EPA that have stood for decades that he has absolutely eviscerated, right? I don't agree with what he's done, but I will absolutely acknowledge that is an achievement for the conservatives, making sure that the EPA is hobbled, absolutely hobbled, right? That's a massive achievement. The other thing is appointment. Appointment is one of the biggest things the president does. Most people don't even know about appointment. They don't really care about appointment, but it's absolutely massive, right? And so we have to establish that language, right? The other thing is the election race, right? There's a difference between the tactics used in the election and the strategy used in the election, right? So one of the tactics that Andrew Yang recently used was he said, I think me and my team have been talking about names that Donald Trump will call me. And he said he's going to call me Comrade Yang, right? So this is a tactic. He's diffusing Donald Trump's name-calling tactics before Donald Trump gets a chance to use them on him, right? And by saying Comrade Yang, Andrew Yang has taken one of his most powerful nicknames and diffused it before it's even used, right? And so that's a tactic. But overall, Andrew Yang's strategy is to get the word of UBI out. And so when you hear him, he's doing a strategy. He's just talking about UBI absolutely nonstop, because that's his strategy, and that's at a higher level than tactics. And here's the issue, right? So when you govern, you use policies and principles. When you're in an election race, you have to win, right? And you use tactics and strategy. So we want to explain to people that the way he is running in an election race is not exactly the way he will be governing the country, right? This is another thing that people don't understand. They don't understand the difference between behavior in an election race and behavior when you're governing, right? They can be quite different, right? And there can be very distinct, real reasons for those differences. Okay, now I've explained what the language we need to give to people in order for them to understand Andrew Yang. Well, you know, there's the language base, right? We need to give that language, and then we need to persuade these people, right? Now, persuasion today is done in two ways. It's done by platform, and it's done by personal, right? I have a platform. I have a platform, right? It's a social media platform. YouTube is really a social media site, in my opinion, right? So YouTube is the most powerful of my platforms, right? I've done over 1,000 videos. I have coming up to, you know, I'm in the high 400s. I have 480 subscribers, and I've had 100,000 views. That's a platform, right? It's certainly not even remotely close to the most powerful platforms, but it is a platform. I also have Facebook and Twitter. I'm established on those things. I have followers. I follow people. I have, you know, conversations that exist there. And Facebook, I've been on Facebook for 10 years, and I have 400 people I'm connected to on Facebook, right? Close to 500, same thing. And so, you know, that's important, right? And that's a platform. Now, and then personal is when we educate and when we persuade one-on-one. That is a personal, that's getting the word out personally. So we get the word out through our platforms and our personal. Now, we use the same method, whether it is platform or personal, as far as the don'ts, okay? So there are things that there are the do's and don'ts. There are things that we do, and there are things that we don't, right? And I'm going to give it to you right now. So cursing, name-calling, it's cursing, name-calling, and then the final one is snacks, right? So so snacks, and let me go through these, right? So we don't curse. It's just we want everything we're saying to be winsome. When we're trying to this is persuading people. This is how we persuade people. You don't curse, right? You can take that out of your language right away, and the reason why is it limits who you're able to reach, right? They're inflammatory words, and a lot of people will stop listening the moment you say them. Some people will get excited by cursing, and they'll get like kind of revved up by it. And again, when they get revved up, they shut off half their brain, and they're not listening, right? Even if they're excited by you cursing, or if they're really offended by you cursing, they're really not going to be listening to you with their attention. And so you want to get rid of cursing. Name calling, you have to get rid of name calling, all right? And the only reason I'm calling this out is this happens in a ton of attempts to persuade, which is ridiculous, you know. And so not name calling of the person you're trying to persuade, but name calling of the Democrats or the Republicans, saying they're idiots, saying they're stupid, saying they're heartless, you know, on either side, right? You have to get rid of the name calling. The name calling has to be gotten out. That's right. There was one more I forgot, and that's called stridency. Okay, stridency is the last thing you need to not. These are all do nots, right? So when you're persuading, there are 3 do nots. Okay, 3 do nots. Do not curse, do not name call, and do not be strident. Right? Now I struggle with this one. This last one, I'm very prone to be strident. And I'm aware of stridency, and I'm really trying to stop stridency in my own speech and in my own demeanor, right? Stridency is when you care about something so much, right, that when you're communicating, you sound like a broken record, and you sound shrill, and you don't sound winsome, right? You just sound erratic, You sound zealous, right? That's stridency, okay? How do you stop from sounding strident, from being strident, okay? Well, the way you stop from being strident is the snack rule, okay? I learned this a long time ago in one of my gaming groups. And they said, when it comes to snacks, don't be the first to eat any of the snacks. Don't eat most of the snacks. And don't be the person who eats the last of a snack, right? Now, this did cause problems because people would bring snacks to a gathering and then nobody would start eating, right? So the way you do this is your own snack, you have to open it up and eat the first of it. And your own snack, you have to unlock the last of it for someone, right? So you could eat the last of a snack if the person who brought the snack says, hey, Joe, why don't you eat the last of that pizza, right? So that's how you fix the first and last issue, because it is tricky, right? But the way you make sure that you're not strident when you're trying to persuade someone is, don't be the first to bring up a topic, right? Don't bring up a topic more than anybody else, and don't make it so that most of what you're saying is about politics, right? Don't let the first thing you say to someone be politics. Don't let the most of what you're saying be politics, and don't let the last thing you say be politics. Because if the first thing you're saying to a person, right, whether you know them or whether you don't, is politics, if the most of the things you're saying to a person, whether you know them or if you don't, is politics, and if the last thing you're saying to a person, whether you know them or if you don't, is politics, you are strident, right? So when you're persuading, you need to do no cursing, no name calling, no stridency, right? And that's how we persuade. And right now, every single one of us, for Andrew Yang, should be educating, giving people the language to understand the awesome information about Andrew Yang and know why he is by far the best of the 15 Democrat candidates and why he should be voted for in the primary in their state, right? And then we need to persuade them. So these are the reasons why. And then we need to persuade them and say, this is how I'm going to get you past Bernie. This is how I'm going to get you past apathy. This is how I'm going to get you past Tulsi Gabbard, right? And that's it. Like, that's what we need to be doing right now. We need to educate and we need to persuade. I'm doing what I can to do that on my platform, and I'm definitely doing what I can to do that personally. And I'm really asking you to do the same, right? So go Yang. Let's get this done. Let's educate and let's persuade in a winsome, respectful, kind way. Thank you very much for listening today. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.